is the world this weekend. Good evening, I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Tonight, as fighting intensifies in Sudan, civilians say they are trapped with no route to safety.
Even if you can make it through all these checkpoints and through bands of criminals, where do we go?
And it's Earth Day, and as countries fail to meet their climate targets, some leaders say they're doing their part to protect the environment.
Environmental justice will be the mission of the entire government.
Also tonight, how Ryan Reynolds is using his A-list Hollywood connections to conquer the world of business.
Canadians are terrible at self-promotion, but not all Canadians.
That's later, but first. The Sudanese capital, Khartoum, remains in the grip of fierce fighting between the army and a powerful paramilitary group. The violence has left hundreds dead, and hospitals are struggling to cope with the injured. A ceasefire agreed to by both sides has failed to hold. Many countries are now scrambling to get their citizens out. Philip Lee Shannock reports.
From her apartment in Khartoum, Canadian medical student Saida Mustafa can hear the chaos in the streets.
We've heard a lot of shootings and bullets and bazookas and bombings and fighter jets flying over our heads.
She and her sister have been trapped since the fighting started, and she says the only advice Canadian officials have provided so far are basic precautions like stay away from the windows or keep your phone charged. A care package of food and other essentials sent by her parents is running low.
I see all these countries, trying to get their citizens out because they care.
The UK, US, France, and China are planning to get diplomats and nationals out. Saudi Arabia says it rescued 99 citizens and 66 foreigners, including some Canadians. Today, in a statement, the Canadian Armed Forces said Global Affairs Canada has asked for military support to evacuate Canadian-based staff at the embassy in Khartoum. Mustafa has not heard any details about civilians.
And I wish that they gave us some sort of comfort, some sort of hope. And I just hope that they stand by us and this whole evacuation plan goes according to the way that they coordinated it.
Meanwhile, the situation is deteriorating, says Alex DeWall, executive director of the World Peace Foundation at Tufts University.
Sudan is actually set for a new cycle of war, even more destructive than the ones that it has had.
Both the Sudanese Armed Forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces supported a popular uprising in 2019 that ousted dictatorial leader Omar al-Bashir. They're now fighting for control despite an agreement that would have seen the return to a civilian-led democracy. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for a 3-day humanitarian ceasefire to mark the end of Ramadan.
This must be the first step in providing respite from the fighting and paving the way for a permanent ceasefire.
Hadil Mohammed is an architect in the Sudanese capital.
Ceasefire, honestly, we're in doubt about it, and no one really feels that they'll really keep up their ends of the bargain, both sides.
As Sudanese and foreign nationals look for a safe way out, some, like Belgian Henri Hemmerich, say they feel trapped.
Even if you can make it through all these checkpoints and through bands of criminals, where do we go?
Aid organizations say it's too dangerous to even attempt medical evacuations, as 7 million residents of Khartoum face dwindling food supplies and disrupted access to water and electricity. Philip Lee Shannock, CBC News, Toronto.
To find out more about what's happening in Sudan, we reached out to Khalid Medani. He's the chair of African Studies and an associate professor of political science at McGill University, and I spoke to him earlier. Khalid, you are from Sudan. You still have family there. What are you thinking as you watch the unrest unfolding in Sudan?
Well, I'm thinking first and foremost, of course, as you can imagine, I'm a political scientist, but the first thing I'm thinking about in this context is the humanitarian crisis. I think that it's unprecedented in the history of Sudan over maybe 67 years since independence in 1956, that this kind of violence would occur in the capital city. And the human toll already is over 400, but the Sudanese doctors union that is doing all of this great work, they're doing all they can in Khartoum, is estimating it at least over 1,000. And we have about 5,000 that have been gravely injured. So I think my first and foremost concern, both as a political scientist, but certainly as someone from Sudan, is the humanitarian crisis. I think actually the entire international community is really focused on that as well.
You know, for us, it kind of seems like this conflict landed in the headlines very suddenly. Can you help us understand the root cause of it?
Well, Sudan came into the headlines internationally for something very positive. In 2019, there was a pro-democracy movement that was celebrated, of course, not only in Sudan, but really throughout the world. And of course, it was supported, frankly, by the majority of people in the region and in Africa and the Middle East in particular, in the Arab world. From that positive coverage now, and after a lull, as you can imagine, of a number of years, 4 years, we now have the coverage of an entirely different sort. The two main protagonists are, on the one hand, a general of the armed forces, the National Army, by the name of General Abdel Fattah Burhan, who since the revolution or pro-democracy revolution of 2019 had assumed power in collaboration and partnership with a very short-lived civilian kind of leadership. It was a coalition government that was supposed to oversee transition to full civilian democracy. On the other hand, his rival is a man by the name of Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, whose nickname is Hemeti, and he's the leader of this extraordinary strong paramilitary militia. And in early December, these two generals were forced through domestic and international pressure to sit around the table with civilian leaders and the political opposition in the country and try to work out a framework agreement to resume the transition to democracy. There are a number of different parts of this agreement that they disagreed upon, but the one that catalyzed this tragic conflict had to do with a disagreement over the integration of this paramilitary militia into the National Standing Army. And both of them realized that this disagreement was an existential one, that whoever was going to win out in terms of the integration or the timetable of integration in this instance would potentially not only win and consolidate his power over the military apparatus, but potentially also rule the country for years to come.
There was a time there after the events of 2019, which you spoke about, that it seemed that Sudan was on a path toward democracy. Is that still possible?
Yes, I do. This kind of military stalemate that we're seeing between two very strong military forces has really made it very clear that the military is not capable of really achieving stability of the kind that these leaders would like to promise to their external, let's say, allies. And the force and the momentum and resilience of civil society and the pro-democracy activists has only speeded up. There's now complete unanimity and opposition against both these military leaders, and complete unanimity with respect to the future, the possible future of Sudan. Now, does that mean that will happen overnight? That will we see a quick end to the conflict? Unfortunately not. But ultimately, like other post-conflict countries in Africa, there can be no permanent solution and no stability in Sudan and the region without a resumption to some form of talks around a transition to a civilian democracy.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for helping us understand what's going on in Sudan and for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you so much.
Khalid Medani is the chair of African Studies and an associate professor of political science at McGill University. We reached him in Montreal. Today is Earth Day, and across the globe it was marked with protests in major cities calling for governments to take stronger action to fight climate change. Chris Reyes reports.
When I say climate, you say justice. Climate! Justice!
Across the globe on Earth Day, condemnation.
These are unlivable temperatures, especially for the poorest and most vulnerable people.
But also celebration, like in New York City, where Broadway stars held a concert to encourage people to enjoy car-free streets. And from leaders, both acknowledgement of how we're making progress and declarations of how we're failing. World Meteorological Organization Secretary General Petteri Talas on a new UN report released Friday.
We have already lost this melting of glaciers game and sea level rise game. So
the report showed the world's failing grades on key metrics like rising sea levels, ever faster glacier melts, and intensifying ocean heat. Talas giving the dire message that some consequences are already too far gone to roll back.
And unfortunately, this negative trend in weather patterns and all of these parameters may continue until 2060s.
Today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took to Instagram to inject hope in the fight against climate change.
Our emissions are actually lower today than they were in 2005 and 2019.
This week, a report from Canada's Environment Commissioner said Canada is not tracking how effective its climate policies are in reducing emissions and also falling behind on some of its climate pledges. On Friday, U.S. President Joe Biden signed an executive order that would require all federal agencies to be more environmentally responsible in how they run their offices.
Environmental justice will be the mission of the entire government.
In Washington, D.C., climate activists walked to the White House, demanding more from President Biden.
U.S. claims of climate leadership are nothing but propaganda and greenwashing.
In the U.S., a new poll from Associated Press shows about 80% of Americans say they've experienced an extreme weather event, and only about half of respondents say they felt hopeful when talking about climate change. From Jane Goodall, one of the world's renowned environmental activists, a reminder to keep on fighting.
It's not just this day we celebrate Earth Day, it's every single day of the year, 365.
A call to action beyond just today. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
Australia is making it easier for New Zealanders in the country to get citizenship. Starting this July, New Zealanders can apply for citizenship provided they have lived in Australia for more than 4 years and arrived after 2001. The direct pathway means they'll no longer need to apply for permanent residency first. The new rules are expected to affect more than 350,000 Kiwis currently living in Australia. A Toronto family says their son is traumatized after an educational assistant cut his hair without permission. The 9-year-old boy lives with autism and is nonverbal. His parents tell the CBC they are unhappy with how the school responded to the incident. Deanna Sumanek-Johnson reports.
One more.
Saraf Rahman showers his mother with kisses, but the 9-year-old, who is nonverbal and has autism, gets very upset if his hair is cut. Saraf's mother, Sarah Zehan, says that led to disagreements with the educational worker who cares for her son at his Toronto school.
She is always talking about Saraf's hair. Every time we met her, did you give Saraf shampoo? Why you don't cut his hair? It's going long.
So the parents say they were horrified when they picked Saraf up from school earlier this month and found him distressed and with visibly shorter locks.
And when I found him that, somebody changed his appearance, he was shocked and I was shocked. I just lost my voice when I saw him.
Toronto District School Board describes the incident this way, saying on that day, Saraf became upset about a red sticky substance in his hair, continually guiding an educational assistant's hand to his head where the substance was. The EA, hoping to make him feel better, trimmed a small portion of his hair to remove the substance. Despite the best of intentions, this should not have happened without first checking with a parent. The family says, small or not, the haircut caused Saraf extreme stress. They have been keeping him home for the majority of the last 2 weeks rather than sending him back with the same educational assistant. Muksat Rahman is Saraf's father.
So as a parents, we lost our confidence on the school.
Families and school administrators have both been facing tough choices amidst what some are calling a nationwide crisis for families of children with autism. Alina Cameron from Autism Coalition Ontario says she hears from parents every day saying their kids do not have enough support to attend school.
Schools do not have enough special education funding to make sure that there are enough education workers for our children to attend school all day, every day, safely.
Catherine Underwood is a professor of early childhood studies at Toronto Metropolitan University with an expertise in inclusive learning for young children and their families. She says these circumstances can lead to conflicts between parents and schools about the best course of care for the child.
Nobody wants to be managed. People want to be in genuine relationship, and I think that requires us to see parents as knowledgeable. That doesn't necessarily mean that parents have all the answers about how to care for their children in every context.
The Rahman family wanted to share their story because they were unsatisfied with the school's response in the weeks since the incident. In a statement sent Thursday, the TDSB said the EA has been placed on home assignment and an investigation is underway. A new spot has also been found for Saraf at a different school. He can start right away, but the family says the adjustment to a new environment will cause more stress. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
Nova Scotia RCMP are investigating a theft at a memorial park for the victims of the 2020 mass shooting. 2 steel beams were stolen from the park in Debert. They were to be used as part of a bridge connecting the memorials for Heather O'Brien and Kristen Beaton. Each beam was more than 5 meters long and weighed more than 300 kilograms. Police believe they were stolen just days before the 3rd anniversary of the massacre. Nick Beaton was the husband of Kristen Beaton.
Just disheartening and disgusting, and it doesn't only have me, it has a whole community and beyond outrage. I got people reaching out from all over, wanting to help out. What can we do? Let's get these replaced. Let's continue on. But it still doesn't take away the fact that someone was that cold-hearted and just piece of dirt to do something like this.
The Mounties say they are still early in their investigation and have not established a motive for the theft. Networks, support, money. All things entrepreneurs need to start and grow their business, and all things that Black-owned startups don't get enough of. A program at one Canadian university is trying to change that. Nisha Patel reports.
Hi, my name is Edo Adolf, and I'm the co-founder of GF.
Young entrepreneurs are packed into a crowded room in Toronto, and the pressure is on.
So far, I've been working on this by myself. I'm actually in the process of onboarding my first team member.
They're pitching ideas, hoping to walk away with thousands of dollars to grow their business. Emmanuel Akindele is up next.
With the $20,000, our goal is to use that to launch Blue Guardian to over 50,000 kids by the end of the year. Thank you.
It's part of the Black Innovation Summit, put on by the DMZ, a tech incubator at Toronto Metropolitan University, one of the first of its kind in the country. Tina Mbachu runs the program, which she says has been connecting Black founders with money and mentors.
There's actually a community of other founders that I can relate to. I can relate to their life stories, I can relate to the challenges, and we can pull solutions from each other.
In the short term, the goal is to grow and reach more entrepreneurs. But in the long run, she hopes the startup scene will become diverse enough that the program is no longer necessary.
If those gaps are reduced, then there's no need for the program anymore, then, because now we're talking about equality, because now we're all sort of on an equal footing, have the same access to resources, capital, knowledge.
Entrepreneur Mark Lafleur faced those challenges firsthand. He says it's common for Black startups to be underfunded because investors, known as VCs, often only back people in their existing networks.
At the end of the day, the VC industry has been known to be, pale, stale, and male. And, traditionally, people are going to invest in people that they can relate to. Or people that...
Lafleur successfully sold his business, True Local, in 2021 and says programs like the Black Innovation Summit are essential.
If we can show and highlight more success stories from Black founders that have done it, then it's going to inspire more, youth today that are Black to get into business.
Back at the pitch contest, Akindele is looking for support. He's building a mental health app for youth called Blue Guardian. He says trying to get a business off the ground is especially tough early on.
There's just a lot of doors that are not always going to be open.
Luckily, he's the big winner and says these funds will be a game changer.
Trying to grow our company, get our app in the hands of as many kids as possible.
Because when you're just getting started, every dollar counts. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
A new school year is underway in Afghanistan, and millions of women and girls remain shut out. Activists in Afghanistan and abroad have called on the Taliban to reverse their restrictions on girls' education. Among the loudest voices was Machula Visa. He was arrested after a trip to Europe, and there are growing fears for his safety. But as freelance journalist Abdul Sattar found, there actually appear to be divisions in the Taliban over this issue. He spoke to activists and members of the previous government who are all living in exile.
Matiullah Visa was arrested in late March after offering afternoon prayers in a Kabul mosque. His family has not heard from him since.
They used the force, they used the guns, and after that they kidnapped my brother.
Ataullah Visa says his brother had just returned from a conference at the Peace Institute in Brussels.
Matiullah had idea, do not leave Afghan people and help with Afghan people and work more in Afghanistan.
It was all part of Matiullah Visa's campaign to restore girls' education. Visa is the head of an organization called Pen Path. Over the past decade, Visa and his team traveled all over Afghanistan, going door to door, meeting with tribal elders to show them the importance of educating girls as well as boys. According to Pen Path worker Zarlasht Wali, this face-to-face approach was the key to changing minds.
When you are visiting people and trying to convince them specifically on the message that why a girl should be educated, why do we need to send our sisters, our daughters to schools, spreading the message for education, developing the mindset and changing people. I believe whatever you want to do, first you need to build the mindset for that.
When the Taliban took power again, Matiullah stepped up his campaign to bring girls back into the classroom, which angered hardliners in the government, according to Afghan analyst Danish Karokhail.
He discussed that women and girl education in Afghanistan, which is Taliban is also angry about him to why he, raised this voice of Afghan women.
Karokhail says the issue of girls' education has divided the Taliban between the hardliners in the country and those based in Qatar who negotiate with the international community that supports women and girls' education.
They try to convince their top management to the allowed women, but the problem is top management is not listen to them, they not listen to the Afghan people.
Muhammad Halim Fidai is the former governor of Afghanistan's Paktia province. He says many senior Taliban won't publicly break with the leadership on girls' education, but find ways to send their own daughters to school.
They say one thing and do another thing. Some of the Taliban leaders who are in Qatar or in Pakistan, they send their girls not only to madrasas, but to secular schools and even to universities. But they don't want that in Afghanistan.
Ataullah Visa says his family fears for Matiullah's well-being and facing threats to their own safety. But he insists that the fight for girls' education has to continue.
This is the struggle, this is possible, which they will be arrest us the other time too, but we will be start our work, we will be work with our nation, with the people, and we will give message to all the people.
For CBC News, I'm Abdul Sattar in Islamabad.
You're listening to The World This Weekend on CBC Radio. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. You can listen to this program anytime on the CBC Listen app or on the CBC News YouTube channel. It was a Hollywood ending for Wrexham AFC this afternoon. The Welsh soccer club secured the National League title with a 3-1 win over Boreham Wood. That means it'll be promoted to the 4th-tier English Football League for the first time in 15 years. Enthusiasm for the club has skyrocketed after it was acquired by a certain Canadian celebrity. Ryan Reynolds bought Wrexham in 2021, and since then, the Vancouver-born Deadpool star has been on an investment spree. From fancy gin to a cell phone company, Reynolds has become one of Canada's most successful investors. Peter Armstrong tells us how he did it.
For the longest time, American tech companies have gotten all the attention.
It's a good time to be in the business of Ryan Reynolds. After investing in the Canadian fintech company Nuvei, he promptly released some videos promoting the brand.
Canadians are terrible at self-promotion, but not all Canadians.
Clearly not. Reynolds sold his gin company for $825 million. He sold his mobile phone company for $1.7 billion. And with every investment, Reynolds is always front and center.
It's time for a global tech company from Canada.
No, we're more of a payments company, right? I found it.
Reynolds is best known as a Hollywood actor in films like Deadpool, but his investing somehow brought him to the small Welsh town of Wrexham. Reynolds and fellow actor Rob McElhenney bought Wrexham FC, a floundering football club, with the promise to lead the team and the town out of the basement of professional soccer.
The world of the Premier League to the fourth, fifth tier, or even where they are in the Nations League, in the non-league, is a world. Is a massive gulf.
That's Canadian soccer legend Craig Forrest. The longtime pro is now host of the podcast Footy Prime. He knows climbing out of the lowest levels takes grit and determination, and most of all, money. But Forrest says the higher Wrexham climbs, the more the owners will be asked to spend.
When you get up to where the Premier League is, if that's where they have ambitions to get to, which would be fantastic, you need to be almost an oil state, where you do, really, to be able to compete.
Reynolds doesn't have pockets quite that deep. What he does have is a seemingly endless supply of charm and genuine connection to the brands he gets involved in. And Sherry Bradish, a sports marketing professor at Toronto Metropolitan University, says that's Reynolds' secret to success.
The links between sport and entertainment and the lines between them are very much blurred.
Reynolds' name has been attached to nearly every conversation about who will buy the Ottawa Senators, and no wonder. How many potential suitors can make their case on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon?
The Ottawa Senators, yes, that is
a Canadian
true.
team.
Yeah. That is it's an NHL team, the Ottawa Senators. I am trying to do that. It's a very expensive, so I need a partner with really deep pockets.
But that need cuts both ways. The deep pockets need a charming frontman to get the deal done, and as he chalks up more investments and more sales, that charming frontman's pockets are getting deeper too. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Please welcome the most admired woman in the world, Dame Edna Everett.
Her wisteria-colored hair, extravagant glasses, and show-stopping dresses covered in diamonds that were definitely not real, Dame Edna captured millions of hearts with one magnificent catchphrase.
Hello, possums!
The character so larger than life and fully realized that many people are mourning her loss as much as the man who played her. Barry Humphries has died in a Sydney hospital at age 89. He was born in Melbourne in 1934, dropped out of law school to pursue comedy, and in 1955 revealed his creation, an Aussie housewife named Edna.
So many people think of Australia as a land of kangaroos and rabbits.
But this isn't so.
No, it's absolutely true.
Edna would evolve and blossom, eventually hosting a TV show interviewing the likes of Boris Johnson.
Boris!
Dame.
Looking at the questionnaire, I see you are healthy except for a little bit of dandruff. And you're healthy because you cycle, don't you?
And becoming supposedly besties with the Queen.
Well, I emailed her. We email each other because our names begin with E, so it's very, very easy.
Humphries had other characters as well, including the boorish, sloppy, cultural attaché Sir Les Patterson.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, one and all.
Humphries' own later years were not without controversy, including criticism for anti-trans comments. His name was stripped from an award at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival in 2019. His passing is an opportunity to look back at creations like Dame Edna, who seem to have a distinct life of her own. We'll leave you with some more of the Dame Edna Treatment theme song, which was written and performed by B.G. Robin Gibb.
I'm wondering if we've got time to hear it. Do you want to hear it, Wayne?
She's a saint, she's a star from heaven.
You've been listening to The World This Weekend. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Good night.
Angel of light from above. She's poetry in motion. She's a rock in an ocean of love. So